is basically is an acronym which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So specific and clearly state the desired results that has to be there, measurable in answering how much is to be done, attainable and not too tough or too easy, because if it is too easy, that is also a problem for the organizations, and it has to be relevant to what to do, because it has to be aligned to the goals of the organization that is achieved. And timely is reflecting that, if you are allowed indefinite time, everybody can do it, and therefore the work that is assigned has to be done in timely manner. That is important. Now, whose role is for appraisal? The first person who is one of the most important persons in the appraisal process is the supervisor. Usually the supervisors do the actual appraising, because they are the ones who is knowing the job well. They are the ones who is supervising. They are the ones whose achievement is basically getting the work done by the subordinates who is working under this particular supervisor. And therefore, the supervisor must be familiar with the basic appraisal techniques. Because if he or she is not aware about the basic appraisal techniques, then the appraisal will go wrong. And we also find that the person must understand and avoid problems that can cripple the appraisal system. The small things may be ignored here, and therefore they must know how to conduct appraisal fairly, because if there is a bias or if there is a middling tendency, all those things will jeopardize the process of appraisal, and also the results will not be right. Then the second agency which gets involved in the appraisal system is the HR department. Now, HR department basically serves as a policy making and advisory body. They have got to play an advisory role. They are not doing it themselves, but getting it done. And therefore, what we find that they provide advice and assistance regarding the appraisal tools to be used, the formats that has to be used, and where it has to be used. That is important. Then they also have got to prepare forms and produce procedures, and insist that all departments use standard forms that is being provided, the same form that is being provided without modifying it. And therefore, they have got to be responsible for training supervisors to improve their appraisal skill. And this is an important task, because as we said, the training of the trainer has to be done here. Training of the appraisal has to be done as far as the appraisal process is concerned. And therefore, they are responsible for monitoring the system to ensure that appraisal formats and criteria comply with equal employment opportunity laws, and also are up to date, not that we are having an archaic system. Now, HR department sometimes would also get involved in the feedback process to the employee, because once the appraisal is being done, it is the HR departments who checks if there are excesses of data, or where excess score has been awarded or very low score has been awarded to any individual. Those corrections or scrutiny is the role of the HR department which is involved. Now, what are different steps in appraisal of performance? First is defining the job. That is making sure that you and your subordinate agree on his or her duties and job standards. Because we heard of the MBO, that is management by objective, and that management by objective prescribes that until and unless supervisor and subordinates are clear about the duties and responsibilities as well as the standards that has to be achieved. It cannot be really a right kind of an appraisal. Then we have got to appraise the performance, that is comparing your subordinates' actual performance to the standard that has been set by the organization over a period of time. This usually involves some type of rating forms, some type of appraisal instrument that is provided, and then providing feedback to the employee, because confidential reporting system did not have any feedback loop. Now, once we talk about feedback, this appraisal can be semi-transparent appraisal or it can be fully transparent appraisal, but in no case the appraisal data of one employee will be shared with another employee of the organization. And that is important because that has to be between the two individuals, or at most the departmental representative who can provide those feedback to the employee while it is being discussed with the supervisor. Then we also have got to design appraisal tools. That is, what to measure is what is important. Therefore, we have got to work output, quality in term and quantity. That is important. We also have got to look at the personal competencies, because if you remember initially when we're talking about 3 C's, one of the terms we used was competency building. And once we look at the competency of the individual, because you cannot appraise the individual against the competence of that particular individual. Similarly, we also have got to have goal, that is the objective to be achieved by the organization. The second thing that forms part of designing process is how to measure. We find that popular methods of appraisal would be followed here. So we have got measures like graphic rating scale. We have got systems like alternation ranking method. We have got MBO, which is part of it. We also have the 360-degree appraisal feedback system, which is part of the appraisal process. What is graphic rating scale, by the way? A scale that lists a number of traits and a range of performance for each that is used to identify the score that best describe an employee's level of performance for each traits. Now, this is also sometimes referred to as trait-based appraisal system within the graphic rating scale that is being utilized. This is a format where you find that the quality, the productivity, job knowledge, and reliability is being tested, and the scale that is being provided is 1 to 90, 90 to 80, 80 to 70, 70 to 60, and below 60, because it is not expected that anybody performing below 60 would be retained by the organization. So therefore, if it is below 60, they will not be part of the organization anymore, perhaps. Similarly, they also have got to look at the traits which are there, and the points that is being assigned is there, and descriptive details may also have to be provided as to why this is being rated like that. Then we also have got the details that has to be there as against the objective which is being set for this kind of forms. So it is a large multi-page forms that has to be filled by the supervisor as well as by the employee themselves, because it is not a single stage appraisal system, because mostly today we talk about double stage or multi-stage appraisal system that has to be followed. Then alternation ranking method is ranking employee from best to worst on a particular trait, choosing highest then lowest until all the people are ranked. So the best performer would be at the top, benchmarked, and then from there arrangement will be done to the lowest level of performance which is there. Similarly, we also have got paired comparison method, basically a part of ranking method, where ranking employees by making a chart of all possible pairs of employee for each traits and indicating which is the better employee of the pair. So because there are so many people who would be getting the same kind of a score in that, but they may vary in the traits. So if you list the trait, which trait is considered to be most important and which trait is considered to be less important for the organization, and it is being arranged accordingly. So they say which trait is most important, that employee will be ranked higher. And this is the format for alternation ranking scale, which is being followed by the organizations which are there. Now, we also have got forced distribution system or method, similar to grading on a curve. Determined percentages of ratees are placed in various performance categories. For example, you have got high performers, you have got high average performance, low average performance, and low performance. And therefore, what we find that most organizations would concentrate on high performance, and that forms part of high performance work system within the organizations. So everybody out of 100 would be placed as to 15% who are in high performance, 20%. This can change, this value can change depending on the philosophy of the organization. We also have got narrative forms as an appraisal system, but that is a difficult kind of a thing. So behaviorally anchored rating scale or bars is one of the methods of appraisal, where an appraisal method that uses quantified scale with specific narrative examples of good and poor performers. But developing bars is a difficult task for the organization, and therefore they have got to generate critical incidents. They have got to develop performance dimensions. They have to reallocate incidents if required. Scale and incidents are very, very important, and develop a financial instrument in order to develop bars. That is important. The advantage of bars is that it is more accurate to gauge the performance. The standards are absolutely clear. Feedback becomes simple, and the independent dimensions are taken care, and it is highly consistent kind of thing, which is referred to as bars. And there are format for the bars as well, which is part of the appraisal system, which is there. Then we said one of the important ones is referred to as management by objective, or MBO. This involves setting specific measurable goals with each employee and then periodically reviewing the progress made. Here we start with the concept of zero base, and then every individual in the management by objective have got to set their own goals. So first is with the supervisors, the organizational goal is being set. Then we set the departmental goals, discuss departmental goals, define expected results, that is set individual goals, which is important. Performance review is being done, and provide feedback. So every department, organization's goal is broken up into smaller goals that will become part of departmental goals, and each department will have the individual goals that is there. So, or if you go by the reverse side, it is the individual goals combined forms the departmental goals, and departmental goals combine the organizational goal which is there, and that has to be similar either way you work. And review and feedback is very, very simple because the person called employee themselves are involved in really fixing their objective, fixing the target. We also have got computerized web-based performance appraisal system where human involvement is less. The person are not fearful. The person are not, are free to, provide feedback. So performance appraisal softwares are being developed, or programs are being developed, which keep note on subordinates during the year, electronically rate employee on series of performance traits, and generate written text to support each part of the appraisals. That is, in part of the appraisal performance of a performance appraisal data that is involved. Electronic performance monitoring system is one such method, having supervisors electronically monitor the amount of computerized data an employee is processing per day, and thereby his or her performance is being checked. Then we also have got potential rating scale appraisal, which is to look at unclear standards. If it is unclear standards, we find that the performance appraisal purpose will be defeated. There are halo effects in the appraisal system. This halo effect basically occurs when supervisors' rating of a subordinate on one trait, biases the rating of that person on another trait. So if one is supposed to be excellent, it is expected that the others will also be excellent, or vice versa is true, that if one is good, they mark either very high or very low. Then central tendency is when people are not very serious for the process and try and place everybody along the center at the 50% point, which is there in around plus minus 10, which is being done by that. These kind of appraisal, problems are also there when an examiner really checks the scripts, which is there. Because if you are coming after a very good, if your script is coming after a very good script, the chances are that errors will be creeping in, and therefore there are methods to avoid those creeping problems in the assessment, that people do not check the entire script in one go. They try and check one answer at a time for every candidate, so that standards are being maintained and markings are fair. And therefore, what we find, although it is very, very difficult proposition, but biases can be reduced by that particular method. Now, graphic rating, if you look at, is basically looking at the excellent, very good, good, average, etc. So we also have got problems related to strictness or leniency error. Both could be there. The problem that occurs when a supervisor has a tendency to rate all subordinates either high or low. Sometimes you are very strict, or sometimes you are very, very flexible, and that strictness or leniency basically biases the data. It creates problem. Then bias can also be there. It can be individual bias due to color of the individual, regionality, so on and so forth. So the tendency to allow individual differences such as age, race, and sex to affect the appraisal rating employee receives is also very, very important as far as this appraisal system is concerned. In order to avoid the problems, learn and understand the potential problems and find solutions for it, find solutions for each problem, use the right appraisal tool, and each tool has its own pros and cons, of course, we know. The train supervisors to reduce rating errors as far as possible. The errors, as we said, like halo effect, leniency error, or central tendency, and have raters compile positive and negative critical incidents as they occur, rather than doing anything else that is in the process. But who should do the appraisal? The immediate supervisor, the peer, rating committees, self-rating, subordinate ratings. Now, these, once all of these are involved, we call it 360 degrees feedback system. That is very, very important today in the organizations which we are looking at. Then we find that the appraisal interview is conducted, where types of appraisal interviews are satisfactory, promotable, satisfactory, non-promotable, unsatisfactory, correctable, unsatisfactory, uncorrectable. This is basically has to be marked by the supervisors. They have got to learn all these points and see as to how they are going to do it. Then how will they conduct the appraisal interview? Talk in terms of objective work data. Do not get personal. Encourage the person to talk, and do not tiptoe as far as the process is concerned. And the performance contract forms are should be uniform for the entire organization. Now, appraisal interview should be handle a defective subordinate, that is, defensive subordinate, that is, recognize that defensive behavior is normal, because once you are facing any appraisal, it sends shivering in the body of the employee. And therefore, what we find that because of the fear, because of the basic, exam effect that we call it, or appraisal effect that we call it, it is so obvious. So you must try and put those employees at rest, try and make them normal, and therefore must recognize that defensive behavior is very, very normal, and therefore try and ensure that you never attack the person's defense, and postpone action if that is kind of a thing. Try and do it at the later stage. Recognize your own limitations well, otherwise appraisal will get wrong. Even if you need to criticize the subordinates, you must know how to do it. Do it in a manner that lets the person maintain his or her dignity and sense of worth. So it should be done in private. It should be done in polite manner. For example, one of the ways of doing it would be that first try and tell the person, him or her, about the positive things, the positives which are present. Now, with the positives, the person will become comfortable, and then whatever negatives are there, try and explain them in a manner that these are part and parcel of doing the job. This can be improved upon by the way. There may be certain problems why it has occurred. Look at it, how you are going to correct it, rather than putting that if you have done this mistake, you are going to be penalized for whatever has been done. Criticize in private and do not do it constructively, rather than for the heck of it. Avoid once a year critical broadsiders by giving feedback on a daily basis, so that the formal review contains no surprises for the employee. So if required, you can give them a memo as well, right? Never say the person is always wrong, because they are never wrong. Sometimes some people do get problems because of which this occurs. Criticism should be objective and free of any personal biases on the part of the appraiser. That is important. Then the whole purpose, we said, of appraisal is to improve the performance of employee, and therefore we must ensure that the interview leads to improved performance. Don't make the subordinates feel threatened during the interview. Give the subordinates opportunity to present his or her side of the story, that is the ideas and feelings that they have, and then have a helpful, constructive supervisor conduct the interview, offer the subordinate the necessary supportive development and changes which are there. We also find that if we have got to handle the formal written warning, purpose of the written warning is to shake your employee out of bad habits, not to shun them out of the organization. And therefore you must help defend your rating both on your own boss and needed to be sometimes defended in the courts of law. A written warning should identify standards by which employee is judged, make clear that employee was aware of the standard, specify deficiencies related to the standards, and indicate employees prior opportunities for correction, and that has to be part of it. Because if the person is not knowing these standards and you are trying to appraise them, the problem would be there. Creating the tools of performance is also important. That is, what is our strategy and what are our goals? What does this mean for the goals we set for our employee? That is how we train, appraise, promote, and reward them. What will be the technology support required for any kind of an appraisal that is part of the appraisal system, and that should always fit into the HR scorecard that is being shown here for a hotel that is there. So what we find that we have encountered certain key terms, that is performance appraisal, performance management, graphic rating scale, alternation ranking method, paired comparison method, force distribution method, critical incidence method, behaviorally anchored rating, that is BARS, MBO, that is management by objectives. We have got electronic performance, EPM, unclear standards, halo effect, central tendency, strictness or leniency bias, and appraisal interview, which is basically forming part of the appraisal system, which we have seen so far. If you have any question, please feel free to ask me. If I know, I'll reply. Otherwise, I'll reply later. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Any question?
So, in the performance appraisal methods, you mentioned narrative form. So, what is it all about?
This form basically asks the supervisors to write a paragraph or a few sentences about the performance rather than just putting them the numbers, which is sometimes being done for comparison purposes. Because this, we know that this narrative rating is very, very difficult. But if it could be done rightly, if it could be done objectively, this basically leads to right kind of a result.
And so can you please explain
to do, because we are going to do content analysis for the entire set of employees who are there. Yes, what were you asking? Hello? Somebody was saying something.
So, I think Sir Riza was asking.
Yeah, Riza? What was the question?
Sir, I was asking for the halo effect, which you mentioned.
See, halo effect is basically sometimes we are overawed by one trait in the employee. Some people, we feel that the person is out to be good, right? So we form opinion even before starting the appraisal system of the employee to be, on the higher side, which we refer to as the halo effect.
And sir, appraisal interview is a kind of feedback interview, right, sir? Like what you have done and what were your learning.
Yes. See, we said that we provide them a form to fill up, right?
Okay, sir. Yes,
now,
sir.
the forms are being filled by the employee themselves, and there are forms which are being filled by the supervisors, or if it is 360 degrees, it is different agencies which is involved. They also fill up the form according to different traits which are there. Now, that is being combined together, and then the interview takes place. The data is there, and the person will take one point at a time and then discuss. Maybe extreme rating is being done by the employee, whereas the supervisor has done a moderate rating or a very strict rating. Now, the person is going to be asked as to why have you rated yourself so high, right?
Okay,
what made you go to a higher scale that is there? Yeah.
So what happens in case of a third-party payroll? Like, for example, I am working through a consultancy and the client is Wipro or TCS. So, like, in this case, how a person is going to get promoted?
they see the person will be promoted by the third party, not by the organizations. The appraisal will be done by the third party only because that is their interest.
Okay, sir. So like they will be asking the.
This is only for the people who are on the rolls of the organization. Right?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Any other?
Sir, is this form differ from different organization, like that appraisal form
Well,
differs?
it does. It does. Different organizations will have different kinds of things. It may be similar sometimes, but most of the time it is different. For example, even within the 360 degrees appraisal system, where 5 to 6 different agencies are involved, these agencies may be different for the different organizations, depending on the nature of jobs that they are performing, right? A selling organization will not involve a purchasing guy because they will not be there, right?
Yes.
So that is important. Any other thing? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I have passed on the transparencies to Anam. She must have shared with you.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
We have
sir.
got it. Thank you so
We
much.
have got it, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.